All right, folks, this is GAIN, the Generative AI News Rundown. We've been doing this every week for 18 weeks now, Eric.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of hard to believe.
That is hard to believe, actually.
All right, so we added this in because people were having trouble keeping up with all the news that's going on. Plus, we just needed a forum that would be fun for us all to discuss what's happening in the space, because everything is happening so fast and furious, as we like to say. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about Apple, their spatial computer, Vision Pro, but we're going to talk about a couple other things about Apple as well. There's actually breaking news, a new Siri shortcut that might interest some people in the generative AI space. We are also going to be talking about OpenAI and Bard, some new reasoning capabilities, which I think are pretty interesting. We have a whole host of other things, Instacart, Poe from Quora, and a few other things that we'll sprinkle in there. I think you're going to enjoy the show again this week. There's always news on the table for us to talk about. So Eric is my colleague at VoiceBot.ai. He's the head writer there. He's written hundreds of stories on generative AI. He's written not 100 this week, but several. And we'll see a few of those as we go through today. And I'm Brett Kinsella. I'm the founder of VoiceBot.ai and Synthetia. And we've been doing this for a number of years. We've been doing generative AI since 2017, so this isn't something that just happened. We started running the Game Weekly show just a few weeks ago, but hopefully a bunch of you are here live. Tell us you're here because it's always nice to know who's in the audience. So just make a quick comment if you're on LinkedIn or if you're on YouTube. Just type in a quick comment, let us know you're here. Also make comments, ask questions, whatever you like during the show. We'll try to incorporate it in. Okay, so interesting week this week, Eric.
Yes.
And I think the big news that was, or the big news that wasn't, is this Apple spatial computer. Now, they don't call it VR goggles. There's some good reasons for that. Least of which, it's not a very, well, people are going to hate me for saying this, but it's not that successful of a product category yet, right? It's still niche. And, sometimes they call them AR glasses because they feel like that's like maybe a little bit better to talk about AR than VR. But now they're talking to spatial computer. And my thing is that they have to talk about spatial computer because it's so darn expensive. You are buying a computer for your face.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And it lets them differentiate from, as you said, not always a successful category. It defines it as it's not just an accessory, it is itself a computer, and it also emphasizes what they want people to take away from it, which is the idea of this immersive spatial encounter where you're not just looking at something in a more 3D view. You're actually supposed to imagine that you're in a new space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, I've looked at a few of the demos online that they've shown, but they don't actually have any live demos. So like Marcus Brownlee did a really good write-up on this. And what he said is he had 30 minutes with the solution, but no pictures. You could only use stock footage. So he gave his feedback on it. But there's another point here which I'll bring up. And that is this idea that there was some discussion ahead of time that generative AI, the new Siri, all of these things would be part of the Vision Pro VR. And this is actually a really interesting space for generative AI. In particular, if you think about virtual reality, there's some people have been talking about how you could actually do custom generative AI as people are walking through virtual worlds and all these other types of things. But they didn't talk about generative AI at all. They didn't actually talk about voice at all. You can get into that in just a moment. Very, very lightly touched on it. It's mostly gesture. I felt like Magic Leap, it sort of emerged from the dead. And, my point is that I think they're living in kind of their own little bubble. They've always lived in their own bubble, but this is a reality distortion field that I don't think the market is going to move to anytime soon. Reality distortion field is famously Steve Jobs' world. It's like everything is possible, and like all the markets moved towards what his vision was. I just don't see the market in the next 5 years moving towards this vision. What do you think, Eric?
I would agree, but with the caveat that if there is some killer app, killer feature that's either under development at Apple or from someone else that we can't even imagine, that is going to be, the thing that everyone does. If somehow, I don't know, I'm picturing a celebrity interior decorators, or some sort of maybe not even a game per se, but some sort of connection to the entertainment world that makes it just unbelievably attractive to people, then there might be a draw. But at the moment, people are still conditioned to think of those kinds of glasses as I said, accessories. They augment, the phone in your pocket. They don't serve as their own computer. So that might change now. But I mean, based on the non-live demos, it certainly looks like a lot of fun, but much more in the vein of try it on at the mall and then definitely not spend $3,500 on it.
Well, yeah, even aside from the price, I just think it's like 30 minutes of fun, or maybe at a time. And I'm sure it'll get better. And I probably am underestimating its impact. Yeah. Brian Ryder just said he's buying one. It's everything he wanted in Oculus.
Right. Well, that's exactly it.
They sort of nailed it. And he says it's going to be sort of this huge gain. And I can see that. I was going back and forth with Adam Chire and some other people. People know Adam. He's the founder of Siri on LinkedIn. You can find our posts in there. Maybe, Andrew, if you can find that post on Apple's reality distortion field in my LinkedIn, you can see there's some really interesting commentary here. And there are some people who are telling me, they're like, yes, this is going to happen. It's going to be really useful. It's going to be when I'm traveling and things like that. I think it's too big to fit into travel luggage and things like that. But Adam had this great thing. So Adam and I were back and forth, and we both basically decided that, it's interesting, but not soon, that this will be like a mass market device. And he has this theory or this formula that he created a while ago, which he shared with me a couple of times. He put it in there. It's basically, he considers this a user experience paradigm. And VR sort of being the next one, VR, AR, whatever you want to call it, spatial. So he has a theory that it's 10 plus whatever the latest increment of the UX was. So you would think it's not just every 10 years. It's 10 plus 1 for the second one, plus 2 for the third one, plus 3 for the third one. So this is the way he starts out, and he says, hey, the mouse and Windows were 1984. 10 plus 1 gives you the web in 1995. 10 plus 2 gives you mobile in 2007. 10 plus 3 gives you conversational assistance. Now that puts it at 2021, 2022, which is sort of interesting because he built a conversational assistant that debuted actually in 2009 as an app, and then in iPhone, Siri in 2011. And then Alexa came a few years later. But I think what he's looking at is really ChatGPT is like brought this up a level, and we're on like a 10 plus, maybe a 10 plus 4 cycle, which would put it at 2035. If you think Alexa is the starting point, maybe that puts you somewhere around 2029. So I thought that was very interesting, like his perspective on it. But there's definitely a mixed bag here. A lot of people are like really into anything that Apple comes out, and they really believe in them. I think I've lost my enthusiasm for what Apple does. I use Apple products. I think they work amazingly, but I think they're really good at mature markets. And I'm not sure they're the people who lead markets anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, it's also, as you said, there's, to me, those kinds of paradigms, there's an element of how much effort it was to adapt and adopt them. And it's, you have a mouse, but that makes using a computer so much easier. You have the web while you're using your computer, not with the web already. So that just enhances it. You have the mobile, which, there was a time I remember when people thought, oh, there's no way that people are just going to be like staring at their screen all day. But if people have something to look at all day on their phone, they will like keep looking at it. And this one feels like it takes a little more effort. Like the thing about the glasses that was nice is that you can turn the visual element on or off. And that's one reason the Google Glass became so popular as an industrial tool. And this almost feels like a very powerful industrial tool more than a consumer product.
Well, I just have trouble. I mean, I show people walking around the house with it on and like having these interactions with their kids with these, they look like Cylons, if everybody remembers that from.
Yeah, because the thing is, it as much as it annoys people when you're talking to someone and they're looking at their screen, now imagine that they're wearing those goggles and you have no idea if they're actually engaging with you.
And by the way, this whole idea of what they call pass through is very cool. Now, pass through is, it says like you can be in the room while having the computing device on as well. You're not actually seeing the room. You're seeing it through cameras. So it's not your eyes. Your eyes are going into the screens and cameras. But people can see your eyes as well, but it's not your eyes. It's a rendition of your eyes. They have a screen outward facing, so it looks like you're a real human being.
There are so many dystopian science fiction books and movies that I've seen that take so many elements of exactly that, where, you know, you don't know what you're seeing. I mean, one of my favorite shows, Sliders from the 90s, they went to a world where everyone thinks they're in a paradise because they're all wearing those goggles. They can't see the wasteland around them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so they did have one announcement from WWDC around Siri. So this is how Siri got its upgrade in the generative AI era. Eric?
Yes. So, yeah, no real discussion of generative AI, but you don't have to say "hey" anymore if you want to talk to Siri. And the thing is, having "hey" in front of the name of the voice assistant was because having that third syllable makes it so much easier from a technical standpoint to know when someone is talking to the voice assistant, and accidental awakenings are still an annoyance that a lot of people don't like. So it's an interesting technical leap that they say that now they don't have to worry about people will accidentally awakening it every time they say, "Oh, I'm being really serious right now."
Yeah. And just so people know, like the wake words, like usually 3 syllables were very helpful. It helps the models be more accurate. But okay, so that was fun. We talked about that. No more "hey" and Siri, and that's about it. Really, no generative AI. And I think that the key thing here is the top topic right now around is generative AI. A lot of people are interested in there, but it doesn't mean other things aren't going on. I think it's perfectly fine for Apple to ignore it. They don't have anything useful to say. I'm kind of glad they didn't talk about it, because they didn't have anything. And so I think this is good that they're not just following the trend. They're just kind of doing their old thing.
Well, yeah, say the closest thing to a conversational generative moment was them announcing that they've upgraded the spell check, so we'll no longer write ducking every time you swear on a conversation.
Yeah, exactly. So great line here from Alexander Tulkanov. Reminds me of a Colbert Report episode where he put a buck on his head and an iPad on top. Yes. And by the way, Alexander is one of the foremost experts on AI government policy and regulation worldwide. He's worked with Council of Europe, a number of other governments. He is my podcast guest this week. So it's actually not up right now. It'll be up this afternoon. It was supposed to be a couple days ago, but like the world got in the way. And so I do have it ready to publish. So that'll go up shortly. But I think you guys will love that. That's a really interesting, in-depth conversation. And by the way, if you just joined, or if you haven't been here before, this is GAIN, the Generative AI News Rundown. And we go through every week, 12 noon Eastern, LinkedIn and YouTube live. And we just chat about it. And so these are people that are in the crowd who are making comments about some of these things right now. So I encourage you guys to do that, to make comments. Let us know you're here if you just joined. And if you're watching this afterwards, which most people wind up doing on YouTube or something like that, join us live at some point. Oh, and by the way, everybody who's here, if you're on LinkedIn, like that comment. If you're in YouTube, like the video. I'd really appreciate it. Subscribe if you're not subscribed, because most people who hit the channel are not subscribed right now. But if you're LinkedIn people, if you wouldn't mind just going, actually, Andrew, if you could put in the chat our LinkedIn post, youtube.com/the @ voicebot AI. If you guys could just go there and give us a quick like on this video, that would be most appreciated. I have another announcement coming up a little bit later, which we teased last week, but we'll come up with that a little bit later. Okay, folks, just one last thing on Apple. Apple doesn't leased markets. I think Dave meant lead markets. He used to think that Apple Silicon changed his opinion. Yeah, that's true. Apple Silicon, the stuff they're actually doing with the stuff that they're doing with the silicon is actually the most impressive. And I think it's, there's this old idea that Apple didn't create markets, that they just refined ones that were sort of wayward. And VR might be one of those. I don't think this is the product. This is sort of the early product. It's not the mass product. They haven't done that yet. And they don't always have hits. We all remember the HomePod, which was a failure. Yeah, by Apple standards, by many people's standards, that would be a failure. But okay, in any event, what they're doing with silicon is very interesting. But we need to move on to actual generative AI. Because Apple is not leading in this market, but OpenAI is. And they had very interesting research paper out this week around reasoning. Okay, and so what you can see is the performance on this chart. The red line is good and the blue line is bad. Okay, so the blue or purple line, that is the success rate of questions and answers around math and science questions with the existing models. They created a new type of model, which performs a little bit differently, a different reward model. And that's the red line. It did much, much better. And it continues to do better. The more examples you give it, the more it gets used, which is really interesting. Okay, so what's going on here? The core concept here is reasoning. And these solutions are really good when you are just asking it for something and it's just like, oh, we know what that is. We'll give you a response. They're not as good when it is something that's complex, like a mathematical problem or a physics problem, chemistry problem. They have multiple steps. Now, if they have multiple steps to ask it a question about particle physics or some sort of factoring equation in math, what they were based on is an outcome reward model. So they call this outcome learning, and what it's doing is it's basically looking at the answer. I asked you a question, look at the answer, and it's saying, was this good or not? And okay, so you have this sort of binary yes or no type of thing. Great. If there's multiple steps, they don't know, the model doesn't know which step it got wrong. It just knows it gave the wrong answer. So let's say there were 5 steps. And the next time it comes back, it says, geez, the last time I tried to do this, I got it wrong. Let me try something else. And they might add a new step. It might change the second step, might change all the steps. What they have now is this process learning approach, which is a process reward model. And when they're training the model, they reward it based on success at each step along the way. Now, this isn't something that is going to be easily implemented into the model, but we're going to talk about something else next, which is related to this from another company. But it is really fascinating because what you're doing is you're saying, okay, there was 5 steps in this. I got rewarded for 4 of them. 1 of them I didn't. Next time I'm going to do the one that I got wrong. I'm going to do this better. When we start thinking about these tools and how they can go beyond just wowing us with like creating text for a page, this is one of the shortcomings. It's not just hallucinations. Hallucinations sometimes are the result of poor reasoning, and this might solve the problem.
Yeah, and it's also notable, I think, that it's not that each iteration is an enormous leap and improvement, but it is a lot of little steps very quickly. So I think it's something that people I don't think talk about quite as much, is not just how impressive these models are at the moment, but how quickly they are becoming better. And I think this is an example of speeding that process along even more.
Yeah, and we can see in here the difference for the ORM is outcome reward model and PRM is the process reward model. It's significantly better across each of these different types of tests that it did. And, part of this is it isn't everything, but it's promising for the future. So I think that's really, really fascinating.
I would say Brian has a comment about whether it will hold up against Kant's critique of pure reason. And I think first you'll need to use ChatGPT to explain Kant's critique of pure reason to most people, and then you can discuss whether it's performing better.
Yeah, fair enough. Maybe someone could put that in the chat. That would be fine. We'll bring that up. All right, cool. So I think that's really good. That is not available today. It's something that is going to be coming up in the future. So let's take a look at that. But something that we might see sooner. Yeah, we might see sooner. Is Bard is doing something interesting. Google, they're actually working every day here on this solution. It's a little bit behind. And I think it's really interesting the way they described it. It's the same concept. It's saying, hey, we're having problems with reasoning problems. Okay. So how do we do this? And the model that they used was Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. a lot of people will know system 1 and system 2 thinking, and they're like, oh, it's basically all system 1 thinking, which is just immediate reaction. You ask me for something, I give it back, as opposed to critical thinking. And so in this case, though, they did something a little bit different. So just see if I can highlight this. With this latest update, we've combined the capabilities of both large language models, System 1, and traditional code, System 2, to help improve accuracy in Bard's responses. Through implicit code execution, Bard identifies prompts that might benefit from logical code, writes it under the hood, executes it, and uses the results to generate a more accurate response. So far, we've seen this method improve the accuracy of Bard's responses to computation-based word and math problems for their internal data sets by approximately 30%. And that's really significant.
Yeah, and they have a great example of it in that there's a GIF a little farther up where they show how they ask Bard to reverse the word lollipop. And not only does it take the word and write it backwards, but it then shows, it'll show the Python code it used for that purpose. So demonstrating obviously a very basic use of Python code, but one that is helpful for this kind of question that is a very just mathematical inversing a word and rewriting the letters backwards. So I think obviously applying that to a bigger questions of math and logic could be really helpful. Although you notice that unlike with the OpenAI thing, they don't mention science questions per se, and I don't know if that's exactly because Bard's announcement was marred by a mistake in a factual question about science, but it still was an impressive example of how coding, old-fashioned traditional coding can be used with the new LLM model.
Yeah, so there are advances being made. I think it's really fascinating. And plus, I think they're doing something different. Now, if you're in the conversational AI space, we've seen this in real time generative code in response to a question before. And that's Bixby, Samsung Bixby, originally Viv Labs. This is something that Adam Chire, if you haven't heard the podcast I did with him a couple of weeks ago, I think you'll probably find that pretty interesting because he talks about how generative AI is sort of the next phase in development of assistants. But Bixby, what he figured out through having done Siri and worked on other things in the assistant space was that you couldn't anticipate all the things people might want to do. And so you had to have some way that the system could identify when something new is needed. It would actually, they created AI to write AI, essentially. So it wrote code in real time. It would interpret what you wanted, and it would say, oh, do we need code for this? Or is there something we have that can answer it? So system 1, we already have something, we can just answer it. If we need code for this, it would recognize that, and then it would actually, the model would write some code to basically do this computation or some sort of logic-based reasoning.
Yeah, and the coding element, I mean, we've seen a lot of interest in the natural language to code requests, and now I think the reverse is starting to become more popular as well because people are keen to see how basic logic can be written in code and how code can be turned into normal language, and going back and forth is very helpful for people working online.
All right. Well, that was fun. I mean, those are like complex topics, and most of the news we cover is pretty simple. It's like new feature, but these are things that are coming, and it's about how the large language models actually function. So I'm expecting some really interesting things over the next year, and that'll help with the hallucinations, but it'll just make them so much more useful for certain types of things that we want a Copilot for. Now, there are some features that are available now. You and I both wrote about this separately. Google Bard, multimodal and local. Multimodal came actually a few weeks ago, although it wasn't available to everybody. They sort of been rolling it out, but you have pictures there. Isn't that fun? But it also has local responses. So depending on where you are, it figures out you can share your precise location, and you have to share your precise location. And it'll give you answers very local. I would say that my results with the local aspects of Bard have been mixed, but how about you, Eric?
I got some good responses. Honestly, it pulled some like a local restaurants of a certain kind. It would pull not only the basic facts about them, but some key quotes from reviews and even suggest what to order based on what people have written about it. And I find it useful. It's honestly just a faster way of going through Google's own pages about places around you. And the idea of personalizing it, and especially over time as it gets to know your interests more, that it'll pull out things like, oh yeah, you said you like this kind of activity or this kind of food. So if you're going here, like here's ideas.
It doesn't do that yet, correct? It's all geolocation stuff still.
It is geolocation, but if you say, you can ask broad questions like, if, for instance, the dinner thing I tried, like what should I do after dinner, and it pulled a couple of places that I've asked for directions for before and told me that there's around. Yeah.
Oh, so it was hitting your profile.
Well, actually, to be fair, I don't know that it was, but it was it only pulled, the only examples it pulled were ones places that I have definitely written directions for. And since I'm logged into Google anyway, I assumed, I did just assume it, but it seemed very, if not, then it was an incredibly lucky couple of guesses.
Yeah. Well, you are the product, right? Very interesting. I mean, personalization is the key gap for a lot of these assistants. So I'll be interesting to see that. I thought the geolocation was nice. This is something that does not work with ChatGPT, even with plugins. You have to be much more specific about your request. It's much more like traditional search. And so, Bard is getting better. I've been using it right along since March when I first got access to the alpha. And I would say even in the last couple of weeks since I/O, so Google I/O I thought was a big upgrade. They obviously had converted to PaLM, the PaLM large language model from Lambda a few weeks prior. By Google I/O, I thought it was really good, or was getting really good, and it's improved since then. I think. I have no problem going there to get my answers now.
Yeah, and multimodal and local both highlight where Google has a real advantage against even big companies like Microsoft, because people have been using so many of Google's products for so many things that if it can link those products that people already use to Bard, then suddenly using Bard doesn't feel like an extra step as so much as just another line on your list of Google products that you already use.
Okay, moving on from the big tech giants, let's go to Intuit. So this was, I thought, really interesting. So tell us more about what Intuit.
Yes, although, I mean, you say away from the big tech giants, but Intuit is one of the largest financial tech companies around.
Yeah, exactly.
So not exactly a minor player, but yeah, Intuit, the company behind MailChimp, behind TurboTax and QuickBooks and Credit Karma. They are essentially they've essentially created their own kind of generative AI operating system to use for all those brands. So leveraging what they bring to the table, which is a lot of information and a lot of financial data and a lot of expertise on not only financial matters, but on how to integrate those subjects with technology. So the idea being that TurboTax could build generative AI experiences for their clients and use all the information it has on doing your taxes to help people do their taxes. Basically the idea of asking ChatGPT or something like it to handle your taxes, or to ask it to explain how to figure out your deductions, that sort of thing, and extending that to some of the other products. We've already seen MailChimp already has been putting out some content creations and campaign creation services using generative AI. So this seems to connect to that in some way, but it's another one of the companies that you may not realize quite how much information they have, realizing that they can apply that information to work it with generative AI to really extend what that information is capable of giving them.
Okay, so what didn't we see with this announcement? And what we didn't see was a demo. Yep. We just saw words.
Yes.
So I don't know if their generative AI solution wrote that, if they did that in MailChimp to get that out. But I thought it's a little unusual. We're starting to see more of that. I mean, even when Opera came out and said, "Oh, we have this thing," at least they showed some screenshots, and this was really light. It was much more like, we're in this game, we have all this thing, and it is a big vision. It's a lot of different large language models. It's different topics. It is applications that are in different functional areas in the organization. So it's really complex. But I was a little surprised. Like, show me something. When they announced MailChimp, they showed me something. Why are they not showing me something here?
Exactly, and that's why it's interesting, because it feels it's not just enterprise, but it's a couple levels deep into enterprise. It's the company behind several companies offering a way to build something rather than rather than saying here's our generative AI experience, it's here's our basic infrastructure for building the tools that can then build a generative AI experience for a specific company that includes several of our brands. So it's like it's very foundational. So it could eventually be the foundation for a lot of things. But at the moment, yeah, as you said, there's not really much to show yet. It's a little surprising that they wanted to announce it now rather than saying, oh, each of these brands now has at least one generative AI experience built on this. But I guess they wanted to get it out faster.
Yeah, in any event, we've got these big software companies that are adding generative AI. There's sort of these new features. Intuit has clearly a broader vision, and they're trying to tie things together more. I think they're going to have to supplement what I can't imagine they can build this all in-house. Maybe they can. I understand they have very large budgets against it, but they've been acquiring in the past. It would make sense for them to make an acquisition here to shore this up, and maybe Jasper would be a good target.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's two ways to go about it. You either work with a generative AI company, or you realize that you have enough data and obviously enough money to put your technical staff to work creating a generative AI system. And in this case, they're going in that direction.
I think the issue that I think they're going to run up against right now, and some of the people are, so in the marketing space, there's already people with some success stories. So in the financial space, it might be a little bit different because we haven't seen a lot of success stories yet. And so they might not be behind anybody. They certainly have more data, but there's this other thing. It's having data is one thing, but actually having users in the field and their feedback is really important. So if you look at Copy AI or Jasper or any of these other tools that are really for marketers, they've refined those significantly over 12, 18 months. And, just coming to market and like trying to copy their layout and these other types of things isn't quite enough. There's certain things that are now expectations, but there's certain things about what make it like a better experience. And so I have a feeling if they purchase somebody, it'll be less for the technology. It'll be more for either their users or for knowledge around how the users interact with it and what they really get value out of.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, I mentioned Jasper. Like, hey, if Intuit buys Jasper, like,
yes,
I guess you should give me kudos on Twitter or something like that.
Yeah.
So what happened with Jasper?
Yeah. So Jasper has been one of the sort of smaller than OpenAI generative AI companies that they've come up with a lot of really sort of independent creations, including conversational chatbots. But they've been really keen on the enterprise market, and they've been pushing out enterprise tools already. And now they've sort of created an all-in-one marketing service using generative AI called Jasper Campaigns. And the idea being that rather than even going one by one and asking generative AI to help you come up with blog post or an email or social media content, Jasper Campaigns sort of combines all in one. You essentially write your brief about a product, about a company, about what kind of audience and market that you're looking to reach, and it'll produce all together emails, the articles, the social media content, all at once, and really sort of keep it cohesive and match whatever the brand identity is, the brand voice. And it makes it a lot easier. The idea being that it makes it a lot easier not only to create all kinds of things very quickly, but also to ensure that if, especially if it's a larger company with a lot of different offices, everyone's sort of on the same page, pulling from the same generative AI model to produce the kind of content that they're maybe localizing or building upon in some way. So it's a really it's a really comprehensive sort of end-to-end service that could be very exciting for especially smaller marketing companies.
Yeah. So, when you say smallish, and which I think is right in this market, I think the last numbers that I heard were actually more than 3 months old, but 120,000 paying users. So let's say maybe they've had a little bit of growth. I don't know, maybe it's doubled, but like a few, maybe 100 to 250,000, somewhere in that range. Now they're going to have to do this in order to compete with ChatGPT, which has high brand awareness. A lot of people are using it for these types of things, to compete with free tools like Perplexity, Bing Chat, Google Bard, which do very similar things. They might not be tuned, but if you know how to do the prompt engineering, if you know how to do the prompt priming and add that to your request, you can get the same types of outputs. Now they've got different templates and different models they're using, which are tuned. But there's some other options out there which are free or near free, certainly less expensive than what you would use with Jasper and this type of thing. But I think this is true for a lot of the companies that have very close or very significant overlap with the generative AI tools.
Yeah,
you have to create this wrapper around it. It's process, it's workflow, it's policy, it's brand adherence in this case, and don't underestimate how important that is. Like, that's so much better if you're running something time to time and you got a team of 20 people, you want to all keep them on the same path, as opposed to everyone just sort of cutting and pasting out of ChatGPT.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it brings a different perspective. It also adds, this kind of not necessarily specialization so much as catering how it delivers the generative AI product. If it's something as theoretically as simple as this, where you have a company or a marketing team that they write briefs all the time. That's what they do. So if they can write a really good one, and Jasper that can then create all the assets they want for that campaign, it frees them up a lot more to play around with those assets, to enhance them, to try to extend what they're doing into other things. I mean, it definitely could take up a lot of the more sort of tedious or rote tasks and give a marketing team a lot more hours to work on bigger ideas for their client, and give their client therefore more bang for their buck.
Yeah, and consistency, in terms of the brand adherence, I think is really important, but also creativity, and it creates kind of an umbrella mechanism for them to work with. So I've spent some time with some large agencies recently in this space. They've been asking me about like what I'm seeing, and they've been sharing what they've been seeing in the market, which has been really useful insight. And one of them, I presented IPG Health this week. IPG is one of the big agency holding companies. They had all their customers in, hundreds of people in there. And one of the things they told me after the keynote was, they're like, yeah, that was great, you're talking about this. One of the things that we've had to tell all of our clients is how we're using this, and that we're not putting their data in and all these other things from a policy standpoint, and how it's around consistency and creating more value for them. So I think that's really interesting, that if you're using a tool like Jasper, it might create a standard that's easier to enforce of how you're using it, because you have to communicate it to your clients or maybe to your customers through the terms of service or whatever it might be. Whereas that might be harder if you're just like ad hoc using all the different tools out there that do a little bit of this, but aren't built as an enterprise solution. Now, OpenAI has said that they're going to have ChatGPT for business. I don't know if that's just going to be policy controls, if it's going to be all these other things around templates and products and brand. But for sure, this is something the businesses need.
Yeah, and yeah, there is that element of sometimes a company doesn't want to necessarily work with a Microsoft or a Google if they can afford / find a better way around it, and if they like working with, especially if they like the people at Jasper, then they may choose to use them and engage with them more, and these are all the side benefits of that. And so it's one of those things where it's like, as much as it may often feel like OpenAI / Microsoft and Google, maybe one or two others, will eat up 90% of the market, there's still a lot of space there for companies that have their own approach to using this kind of technology.
Fair enough. Okay, folks, this is the Generative AI News Rundown. Thanks for joining us. If you joined late, feel free to let us know you're here in the chat. Ask questions, make comments. We'll bring those up on the screen here. Also, I want to let people know that we have an event coming up that's going to be interesting to people like you. And that is Synthedia 3. It's around innovation and generative AI. There's a link in the chat right now, and LinkedIn for sure. I'm sure that'll go into YouTube as well. So bit.ly/Synthedia and the number 3, Synthedia 3, bit.ly Synthedia 3. There you go. Bring it up. Thank you. So join us. We have the founder of Perplexity AI, founder and CEO. By the way, he was a research scientist at OpenAI before he founded Perplexity. Now, what is Perplexity? It is what I think is actually the It's what Google search should become. They've done such a nice job with that product. It is generative search, or it's conversational search, some combination of those two. Conversational generative search. We don't really have good labeling for this. He doesn't really talk publicly much, so this is going to be great to get him up. We're going to show some new features. We're going to do lots of demos at this event, by the way. But he's going to talk about his strategy and taking on the giant. So he's, as an independent, I think he's the one that has the best chance of doing that. We're going to have some other people are going to be showing some demos. Actually, WillowTree is going to join us as well. WillowTree is a company that makes apps. They're a consultancy / agency. They make mobile apps, websites, web apps for customers. They're going to show some demos of some things they're doing. They're getting significant productivity gains on their projects, plus they're rolling out systems or solutions, which I think is really few. We've got some others that are going to show up. So I think you guys are going to like it. So do register. It's free to attend, but you have to register, and I think we will cap out on tickets just because it's live streamed. Now, also, if you can't make it on the 27th, it's 27th of June at noon Eastern time. If you can't make it, actually do register, because then you'll get early access to the videos. So you'll be able to watch those. There's going to be some really interesting stuff shared there. All right. So enough on that. Actually, if you don't have it, maybe Andrew put in there like how to find voicebot.ai and sign up for the Synthedia newsletter, which is Synthedia is a daily newsletter and sort of an analysis of a topic in generative AI space. All right, so to look for those in the chat. All right, so the next story we have, Eric, is one you wrote. Well, there's a couple of things about Poe, but I think voice input is probably the fun part. And then we're on Android. So, and we've got this, you think of it as the AI chatbot hub. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so Poe's, it's been around a little bit now, but Quora, which is famously a sort of a place where people can ask and answer questions that other people have. They created Poe as a way to bring together several different large language models and their chatbot creations, and give people a chance to talk to more than one of them without having to switch websites. So, for instance, they had OpenAI, they have ChatGPT there, they have Claude, a couple versions of Claude from Anthropic. And it was growing pretty quickly online, so they launched an iOS app. As is often the case, they launched an iOS app first, and now it's available on Android. So suddenly a lot of opportunity for more people to play around with these generative AI chatbots. And again, starting with the web, they've started allowing voice input, which is one of those things that may not necessarily seem super exciting, but it's just a fact that it's faster. It may be faster to read an answer, but it is faster to speak a question than it is to type it out, and obviously better in certain circumstances. And of course, makes more accessible to some people as well. So it's a feature that's useful and suggests that Poe is going to have some longevity if they're willing to invest in that kind of service. But Poe is one of those things that it feels very experimental in terms of how and why people use it. But I think that when it comes to bringing people into the world of generative AI, there are a lot of people who use Quora for very casual things. But if they see, you can also ask all these different AI chatbots your same question, I think you're going to get, even if it's only a trickle, it's a pretty large stream to get a trickle from.
I think there's a large group of people who are Quora adherents, and then there's most of the people who run across Quora because it shows up in web searches or in Reddit threads, as link throughs and things like that. This is interesting too. So they've added these solutions. They've got Poe, and they've got this access to Claude and to ChatGPT, and they're not picking winners. But I think the fascinating thing about this is, if there's any business which could just be where this is an existential risk, generative AI, it's got to be Quora, because Quora is a knowledge sharing space. Now, this is supposedly experts. That's we can question whether they're all experts on there, but there are obviously some very erudite people on there. And if we're just always going to ChatGPT or Bard or Bing Chat or something with Perplexity to get our answers, why would we ever go there? Maybe there will be a link through to a Quora article, although I've never seen one of those in one of my source links. But you could see that entire thing going away. So I think it's really important for them to have something like this, because then they're saying you can have the web, you can have the generative AI model, and you can have our curated knowledge base, which gives you something special. It's like in the old days, we would have said it's like having the Encyclopedia Britannica or a bunch of experts in the room with you. Really important for them to do that. So I was kind of surprised that this is a separate entity and not actually part of Quora. It's like by the founder of Quora, but it's not part of Quora, which I think he just clarified for the first time recently.
Yeah, and it's also part of a larger project, I think, that certainly feels like Quora, but again, yeah, as I said, they're saying it's definitely not. But it also has its own API, so it's not just for end users. It's also an opportunity for people to build their own generative AI chatbots and play around with those capabilities and share them with other people. So there's the idea being that you want to give your chatbot a certain kind of personality or try to have it emphasize certain subjects, then you can do that and then share it. They have what they call the PO protocols for sharing these new chatbots. But it opens up opportunities that having only one or two companies involved in generative AI would very much limit.
Yeah, and Core is a really interesting business. It's like it's like Wikipedia with identity, opinion, other stuff. So I think it will be interesting to see how this plays out. It is an existential risk, but they might thread the needle here and do something special. We have a couple more stories, by the way, after this, and we're going to do winners and losers of the week, which we just started last week. So I've got to think about which mine are, but I'll come up really quickly. I'll ask Eric first. We do have this question though from Brian Jones. Thanks, Brian. What do you think of PI, Personal Intelligence Virtual Companion? I'm not sure I've come across that. Have you?
We've talked about it. I don't know if we talked about it on here. It's the Inflection Generative AI.
Pi. Oh, yes, Pi. Yeah, because I've never seen it. Like, I always see it as Pi. Yes.
Yeah.
You used it more than I did. I was unimpressed with my initial trial, but
yeah, it's one of those things that was discussed before ChatGPT came out and seemed really exciting then, and then ChatGPT came out and made it seem very much less interesting. Inflection has a lot of ways of discussing it as a not LLM related, and that it's more about its emotional intelligence, and
yes.
they really try to pitch it as like almost like a therapist or like a friend that is a good listener more than a knowledge source or a professional tool. So I'm not saying it doesn't have its uses, but it feels very much like comes from a different world.
Yeah, and by the way, just like general thoughts on this, personal companions, I think, are going to be very significant. I'm not sure Pi is going to be that personal companion because it's not interesting enough. I mean, I think the other personal companions I've seen, they have more personality. It's more fun. It's more of an entertainment environment where that seems kind of serious.
Yeah, although I will say, I don't know how much of this was programmed in versus the versus Pi itself, but I do remember when I asked what makes it different from ChatGPT, it made a point of saying that it's designed to have conversations with humans, but that ChatGPT is developed to generate text, which is definitely suggests some personality.
And Reid Hoffman's behind it, the founder of LinkedIn, and he knows to think of. But he's been really good on the business side. PayPal and build a network there. He was the product manager there. LinkedIn, obviously, from a business standpoint, is a giant. Many of you are on LinkedIn right now. Whether this will be a good. I mean, maybe it's a good business assistant. Maybe it's not a personal companion, but great question, Brian. Thanks for asking about that. All right. So next story we have is another one you wrote this week. Instacart, another big brand that is using ChatGPT, which they say, but an LLM to provide more value in their existing products.
Yeah. And Instacart's been very much on the on top of generative AI as a feature. They were part of the initial lineup for the APIs embedded within ChatGPT. They were part of the initial lineup that Google announced for Bard's embeds. And so now this sort of just takes that, puts it and goes the other way by putting, in this case, ChatGPT within Instacart itself, so that you can, if you are an Instacart user, now you'll be you can talk to ChatGPT essentially, but have it be your grocery assistant. And it's certainly one of those examples of there's a lot of information about food and a lot of information about food products, and if you can have an instant expert who can, in a more in kind of conversational way, give you ideas about what to make or what to make in addition, or what ingredients you should get, then there's a lot of consumer value there. And then, of course, coming from the other direction, if a food company wants to sponsor a product, then they can have it surface at the sort of the top of the list, the way Google does with their sponsored links. Then
I am sure anything that Instacart does in this is going to be about upsells, reducing abandoned carts, all these different types of things. Whether people will use it for this, I don't know, but I assume so. Anytime you have an app like that and you add something like a large language model that allows you to drive better intent alignment, like understanding their needs, or to give them a little bit of delight, of course. And I'm sure they're going to drive that towards whatever increases order size, increases order frequency.
And we've talked about how personalization is going to be so important for LLMs in general, and you can't get much more personal than what do you eat every day. So an AI that can look at what you've bought before and make suggestions based on that has very obvious, it's very obviously going to be interesting to people who maybe want to find something similar or broaden their eating habits, and Instacart's happy to help them pick out what they're going to buy.
All right, folks. By the way, we're going to move on to the next story. I've got two more real quick hitters, but you have an assignment right now. If you're in the room, feel free to do this. Eric and I are going to do winners and losers of the week. We did that last week as well. We're going to try to do this every week. So in generative AI, feel free to put in the comments who you think your one winner and one loser of the week is from generative AI standpoint. We'd love to see that as reference or incorporate it or whatever. So last time I didn't tell people about it ahead of time, but if you want to say what the winners and losers are, because a bunch of people did it, like we didn't see them till after we stopped recording. So put just in the chat, winner and loser, and we'll look at that as we go through. Okay, so another story, Eric. OpenAI.
Yes. Yeah, OpenAI. So some of you may recall there was a bit of a kerfuffle with ChatGPT having a security flaw that they then had to fix, and it led to them creating a bug bounty program. It also led to them getting banned from Italy for a little while, and sort of hit the gas pedal on discussions, at least, about regulations around generative AI. But now OpenAI is giving out about $1 million worth of grants to encourage people to use generative AI to enhance cybersecurity. So whether it's an actual product that can better defend, or whether it's employing generative AI tools to create best practices and workflows and things like that, they're really trying to say, oh, this technology is a security helper, not just a potential problem for those involved in cybersecurity. So I think it's smart, and they certainly have plenty of money for these kinds of grants. This is like the third or fourth one they've announced in the last month or so. So it's a way to really bring in more small developers and early stage companies.
Really smart to do. I don't think we need to say much more about it. I'm glad they're doing that, because it'll just make the product better for everyone, and it hopefully will reduce the risk of there being issues out there. Okay, so another story for today. I don't even think I told you this was coming up, so this will be new to you. McKinsey says about half of employees are using generative AI. So I thought I would, I just mentioned this about IPG and how they work with their clients, and there's a couple other agencies that I've talked to recently about this. So first of all, if only half of McKinsey's employees are using generative AI, what the heck? They should all be using it, at least for research, right? Because it's such a great research tool.
Well, yeah, I think it's more that half of McKinsey is lying about not using generative AI.
But they had to go through the same thing with this IPGs. This is how we're using it, and this is why. Now, another interesting thing that's happening along these lines is, so first of all the services firms are using these things. They're at least experimenting with it. Most of them are doing it because they want to help their clients use it, and their clients are asking them about it. And they have to show them what they've done. So we think of this dog fooding idea, like eat your own dog food. Some people don't know that phrase. I think it's very common in the US, maybe not as much so elsewhere. But if you work for Purina, one of the big dog food manufacturers, it's like human tasters. Is this good or not for your dogs? But they're doing it internally. And some of them are being asked for projects. There's like, are you using generative AI? Okay, so how much of a discount am I getting because you're using generative AI? Because significant productivity enhancements, at least on the code generation side. On the creative side, it's like more questionable whether there's a lot of benefit, a lot of cost savings there. There could be, but most of them are using it in ideation, and then they're using the normal processes after that. But this is a thing. I think every company is going to have to not only have their own policy internally, but they're going to have to be able to tell people what their policy is and how they're using it and why, and they're going to have to enforce it.
Yeah, and also that idea that like, oh, therefore there should be a cost savings. That feels to me a lot like the not too long ago and probably still around idea where social media, yeah, that's for the interns. We don't pay anything to do. We don't have to pay any attention to that. That's not an important channel or anything. The idea that like, oh well. If you're using generative AI, therefore you're not really working that hard. Whereas in reality, as you and I certainly know, good prompts and good prompt engineering and editing and stuff, that's, still takes brain power. It can speed a lot of things up, but it doesn't eliminate the need for the human component to, spend time working on it and certainly going through the results and making sure that they work. So I don't know if I hope that's not a thing that companies start thinking of as that's purely a cost savings tool as opposed to a way to get more and better content more quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's do our winners and losers of the week. If you want to put it in chat, go ahead now if you haven't already. I'll start with my loser for the week, which is Apple. And it's not that they're a loser because they didn't talk about it, because I just think they're not ready to talk about something that might be generative. Plus, they focus on control and all these things. And they do use a lot of AI. But they've been working on this. They've had some of the best minds in the space working on this for a long time. Whether it was part of Vision Pro or a new Siri or something like this, Apple continues to disappoint beyond sort of the mundane, I say mundane, but important privacy and security issues and some other personalization things. They just haven't been using it. So because they've been working on this so long, this would have been the time for them to roll something out and wow and delight people. But they didn't. And I'm not confident we'll see it next year either.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would say my winner for the week is
losers first this week.
Losers first. My loser for the week is probably the radio host in Georgia who's suing OpenAI because of his playing around with ChatGPT led to it creating a hallucination that was definitely not true, accusing him of embezzling from a nonprofit, and he's understandably upset about that. But as much as litigation might seem the answer, partly because the technology is so new, and partly because the idea that you could sue the company behind a model like this for a hallucination when OpenAI clearly states over and over again, this may come up with hallucinations and not be true. That seems to me to be a losing proposition, and therefore my loser for the week.
I think that's a good one. And by the way, just along those lines, Alexander Tulkinoff and I do talk about this in the VoiceBot podcast. This will be up within a couple hours at the link I just put in there, voicebot.ai/voicebot-podcasts. Because he is at work in policy and regulation, we talk specifically about these lawsuits around defamation and what his legal perspective is on that. So I think you'll like it. We also have so we'll start off with the winners with Priscilla Nunez. She's got a suggestion here. Winner for my newbie friends and non-technical business professionals in the generative AI world: Google generative AI app, no code building options. Losers, anyone not considering generative AI. Thanks, Priscilla. Yeah, I mean, I think that the fact that Google is actually doing all these like low code, no code type of options, particularly with Cody and some of the things they're doing outside of that, I just expect to see more of it. And Google is one of the companies that can really do this, that can basically ultimately make a lot of people who are not developers, because they have such a great platform. Plus they have the underlying technology, and for people to be able to write their own little code from time to time is great. And I'll just say that my winner for the week is Google. The announcement, first of all, the multimodal, part of it's a catch up story with multimodal, although I think their multimodal is actually better integrated than ChatGPT right now. And you don't have to like do plugins and all this other stuff. It just works. The localization, I think, is a step in the right direction. And what they're doing right now with the reasoning, I don't think they've rolled that out yet, but I like that approach that they're taking. So I'll say, Google, they're the winner. And I think they've only been a loser most of the weeks. So I think that's actually a really good thing for them, and shows that, give them a little time. They actually have the components. They're pulling them together.
Yeah. I would certainly agree that they're a major winner. I would say another big winner is potentially the artists who are working with generative AI. There's been recent expansions from Adobe bringing their Firefly tools to enterprise clients. There's the major investments being at Google in Runway, which does some genuinely quite amazing stuff with text to video and video to video generative AI tools. I think as much as the visual and video side of things seems to be not quite at the forefront of the conversation as much as it was a couple months ago, there's still a lot going on there. And I think those who, with all caveats about rights and attribution aside, the actual technology itself is becoming really even more impressive and getting a lot better at avoiding the pitfalls we saw early on involving hands and so on.
Yes, there were plenty of pitfalls going forward. Okay, folks, before we leave, I just need you to do one thing for me. If you're watching it on YouTube, just hit like, do the same thing on LinkedIn. Also, if you're on LinkedIn, if you don't mind just going over and subscribing to the YouTube channel or just hitting like on this, there's a link in here. Just go to the live tab if you haven't been there, and you'll see this is what's up there right now. And don't forget to sign up for our stuff. So youtube.com/@ voicebot.ai. Synthedia 3, it's going to be amazing. There were a limited number of registrations. It's an online conference. It's going to be 3 hours, demos, amazing speakers. It's all about really interesting innovation. There'll be some new stuff you haven't seen before. So definitely do that. And sign up for the newsletter. And that's just bit.ly/Synthedia. And you'll get that every day. And then go to voicebot.ai, because you saw it. Most of the articles are from that. If you want to keep up with this, it's great listening to this is a podcast. And by the way, this show is a podcast every week as well, the VoiceBot podcast on the YouTube channel, but also we write every day. There's a lot of stuff out there. So we hope it's a useful resource. Let us know what you think about it. And Dave Gerbino, thank you so much for liking this. We appreciate it. You are a model citizen. I can't say, actually, you are a model citizen anyway. You're a great person, just in general. But I like you even more because you like their stuff. All right, folks, thanks a lot. That's been really fun. And I think that's going to be it for this week. Bye-bye.
Bye.